what we would do, we'd have that one night a week of a performance session where all the teams would be together and do very similar things. But ultimately, the most contact time is with the coach. So the coach of the team has the most influence on the injury rates, what they're doing, because one night a week, that's 25% of the week. If we're training 4 nights a week, that other coach is going to have 75% of the time with them. So if I do everything right in my one night a week session, but you run them into the ground and the other 3 nights, then it doesn't matter what I did with them on that one night. So we really had this great relationship with all the coaches, that we were all on the same page in terms of our objectives. We talked about the biggest thing being availability of players. Like, we wanted to have almost every player available every weekend for every game that we played. That was our goal in terms of our performance. And if the test scores got better, which they did, that was an added bonus. But ultimately, we wanted to try and build robust players that weren't going to break down in season. And in order to do that, they had to be available to train every day. And we had to do it in a way that was obviously safe for the players. So, I think we did a really good job with that. It was difficult to do it in the other parts of the club because I didn't have that type of intimate relationship with the other staff members where, like, I'm on the field with them every day. And I think that made a really big difference in terms of, the players and their performances, because just some additional context in the south part of the club, we had a very small player pool. So the challenge was, if our players got hurt, we could pull players up from our lower teams, but they were not near the quality of the players that we had. So we're like, we really need to get everything right in terms of injury prevention, load management, the wellness reports that they would put in with the Soccer Pulse app, and then just communication amongst the staff, making sure that, if we had multiple games coming up, reducing the load for those players so they felt good at those events. If they're coming off of that, making sure we reduce the load for them, little things like that. And so it's, when you hear like ACL prevention, it's not a 5-minute exercise a week. It is everything that you do with your players and how they also treat themselves off the field too. So if you do everything right, I think, that data set of 4 ACL injuries in 4 years, I think it's a really good example of what can be done. And I actually, some of the ACL injuries that happened in that season, I'm like, man, like, I wish we had done something different. Maybe there was something we could do. And I think ultimately not every injury is preventable, but I think, if you take that holistic approach, there's a lot of good that you can do with the athletes.
So for a lot of the coaches listening, this concept is very new to them with workload management and what calculations to look at. So I really want to break this down simply so that they can start to apply it or even utilize Soccer Pulse. So just like kind of walk me through a week and how you're talking with the coaches about each player, what you're calculating in terms of workload and like the data that stands out the most to you.
Yeah, so I think the starting point is always the way that you want to play. So if I want to play a really high pressing style, if I want to really have the ball in possession, I want to connect a lot of passes, that's going to have a really high demand in terms of actions on the players. So I try and break it down into, like, if you want to play very direct, it's going to have a lower demand. And the reason being is you're not asking your team to get really expansive when you have the ball. You're kind of just saying, okay, we get it, we lump it long, and we get forward. If you're asking your team to press high up the field and you're asking them to really have the ball and be a possession-based team and really exploit space, when you lose it, obviously now you have to get compact. So that's an additional load on the player. But also, if I'm playing a possession-based style, I'm asking them to drop back every time they get the ball. It's much easier to just say, okay, I'm going to be very direct and get up the field. So I think your starting point is always how you want to play, because the number of actions and like the type of sprints that you're asking your players to perform, that's going to vary based on your playing style. So starting with that, and obviously in the program that I worked with and the programs I work with now, we have a very clearly defined style of play. We know how we want to play when we have the ball, how we want to play when we don't have it, and how we want to play in transition. And usually, like the styles that I just told you about, the possession, high pressing, and counter pressing when we lose it, that is a very high energy demand just because of the number of actions per player. So I'd say for a coach starting off with this and being like, okay, how can I apply it? You have to figure out how you want to play first, and then break it down from there and start to apply some fitness laws or fitness principles. So like a really good example is midweek, like that Wednesday, that's usually the day that we overload our players. So we push them in terms of the duration of the session. It's usually the longest. The number of actions that they have to perform in their small-sided games is usually the highest because they have the most time to recover before the next weekend. And they also have the most recovery time from the prior weekend. So we want to push them when they feel good, which is usually that midweek session. So if I'm a coach and I'm trying to figure out how to apply this, there's a really good book that a lot of coaches should read. So Raymond Verheyen is a huge influence on me, Tiff, a lot of the other coaches I work with. So it's called like football action theory, and essentially you're saying, however many actions we perform in a minute, for us to get fitter, we want to be able to do that for longer. So we want to be able to play at a higher intensity, very similar quality in actions from minute 1 to minute 90. If we can do that, then we've gotten fitter. And so what I'll do with teams in preseason is we'll bring them in and we'll play 10-minute games of however many players we have. And we're just trying to see at what point does the tempo of everything drop? At what point are we not performing the actions that we need to? So a really easy example is with the 2010 boys that I have now. They'll do, I think they got to we did 2.5 sets of 10 minutes. So they played about 25 minutes. And before they just couldn't run anymore. They were just gassed. They couldn't press. They couldn't possess the ball. So for me as a coach, I know that's my starting point. That is 100% capacity for those players. So if I want to not overload them on a day, I would do half of that. I would do 50%. So it's starting to assign, just like in strength training, you'd have your sets and reps and your recovery time in between. I now know what their capacity is of 100%. That's the best they can do. So I want to push them past that. But at the same time, at other days during the week, I may want to take my foot off the gas and go a little bit lighter. So I already have a starting point in terms of the duration of the games that I play. So if it's like a Tuesday, then I know maybe we're still recovering from the weekend. We'll do 5-minute games because I know that that's not going to fatigue them. It's not going to overload them. So I think that's a really good place for most coaches to start, is to say, how do I want to play? How long can we play that style right now? And then how can I push them throughout the season to get fitter and do it at the right moments? So I think having a number assigned to the teams and the style of play is really, really helpful. And Adam Tipper, who's the director of coaching at Fox, where I am now, we use the VO camera and we'll record them each week. And it's cool because we can show the kids, hey, you're getting fitter and you're getting fitter in the style of play that we want to play. And it's contextual, right? So it's not like we're putting you on the line and having you run, even though I think sometimes there's moments for that. But for the player, it's more fun and they get to see actual progression. They're like, hey, I'm getting fitter as we get close to the season when the games start to matter and, we need to have everyone at 100%.
That's great.